really quick. Just want to make sure that you guys hear me and see me before we begin. Hi, Lisa. Oh, all right. So you want to know if you can start growing corn in January. Yes, that's actually true. And I'll get into that real quick, but if someone could just put in the chat real quick if you guys can hear me and see me okay, that the video looks all right. One time I was doing a class and it was like really laggy. So just want to make sure everything is good. Thank you. Thank you for confirming for me, SB. Okay, Lisa. Yes, years ago when I started trying to grow corn, or like learning how to grow corn, the planting calendars for Florida do say that Central Florida and South Florida can start direct sowing seeds for corn in January, and that is true. Corn, you know, it's a warm season crop, so you wouldn't think that, and I was kind of in disbelief the first time I did it, but for you in South Florida, you can pretty much start. I would recommend direct sowing the corn like the first, second week of January, especially if you don't get any frost. For me in Central Florida, I like to wait until like the last week or the middle of January, something like that. Just a little bit longer for me. But yeah, you direct sow the seeds, keep the soil watered, and they'll start germinating and you'll get some corn. So the thing with corn is that it attracts a lot of pests, especially the worms. I get a lot of corn earworms every time that I grow corn. That's pretty standard and normal. If you're in Florida, you're gonna get the worms. So spray with spinosad if that happens with your corn crops. So by planting early in January, when the pest pressure is just kind of naturally low, it's so much easier to grow corn during that time. So you should be harvesting 3 months or so after direct sowing the seeds. Corn is one of those crops that is like right on point. Like I find, like if the seed that you buy says it has an 80-day maturity date, it's pretty spot on. It's crazy. Most other crops, they just take a little bit longer beyond whatever the maturity date says, because if you're a home backyard gardener, your growing conditions are probably not going to be ideal, like some farm, right? So always expect like it will take a little bit longer to grow your crops if you're a home backyard gardener. But yeah, corn is awesome. I can't wait to start planting it in January as well. Before we get started, just so you guys know, I have a YouTube membership. There's 2 different tiers, and the garden club tier are the members that get to decide what these live classes are about. So I try to do one every single month. Sometimes I do 2. It just depends on my schedule and what I have to show and talk about, what's going on in the garden. So I always ask my garden club members, like, what do you guys want to learn about? What are you struggling with? That kind of thing. And this time when I asked, everybody had a completely different kind of question. So I was like, all right, instead of being like a specific topic today, we're just gonna be open-ended and I'll answer all your questions. So that's how this class happened today. If you ask a question, please put your garden zone and state so I can better accurately answer that question for you. So this is just free form. I'm gonna take you around the garden as we chit chat. My tomatoes, if you were in the last class or maybe the one before that, they were like destroyed from all the hurricanes and everything, but they are loaded right now. I'm so happy. I'm so excited. I can't wait to start harvesting. Hopefully, I don't get a really bad cold front. Usually the last week of December, like literally Christmas, we get like a really cold one in the 30s, that kind of thing. And that greatly, it's usually not enough to like damage my plants, especially tomatoes. They can tolerate a lot more cold than you think, but it definitely slows down their ripening up process. And I've had a couple people actually email me asking me like, hey, my tomatoes have been green forever, like what's going on? Well, there's kind of like 2 things going on. One, it's cold, and the warmer it is, the faster tomatoes will ripen up. So it's just getting cold. It's going to take much longer. There's really nothing you can do to speed that up unless you can make the ambient temperature warm, like in a greenhouse or something. And the second thing is the daylight hours are also decreasing. So there's less daylight hours, there's less sunlight, all that kind of thing. So yeah, your tomatoes, if you're a southern gardener that grows tomatoes during like the fall, winter, and spring like me, it's just, they're just going to be slow this time of year. It is very sunny over here, Flame Guy. Florida, I'm born and raised in Florida. I'm so lucky that I guess my parents and my family decided to live here because I'm zone 10A and I would never move out of 10A or 9B just because you can plant and grow everything. That's super tropical stuff and then the real traditional American, European vegetables like broccoli or whatever. So if you grasp the correct time of year to plant things, you can grow like everything in those two zones, 9B, 10A type thing. So luckily I was born and raised here and I will never leave this area because of that. So yeah, while the majority of the country is covered under snow, I'm out here harvesting all my tomatoes. So yeah. There's a caveat to that though. Florida, our summers are horrible. That's horrible. So I trade off 3 horrific months in a row of really hot weather for like 9 months in a row of like the best growing season. Like I grow my tomatoes 9 months in a row. That's a long growing season. Hello from Punta Gorda. Aaron is a 9B Florida and was hit hard last week with the frost. The stock is still alive. Should I just put, do you mean the tomato stalks? If they're still alive, I would keep them. Yeah, you're gonna get some leaf damage, maybe some of the stems, stuff like that. I'm gonna advise you though not to prune out the damage. And I know that sounds really weird, but when cold fronts move through and your plants in your garden get cold damage, usually the cold damage starts at the tips, right? The tips of the branches or the leaves, the vines, whatever, and it kind of moves inward. So if you leave that dead, damaged tips, growth, whatever there, it kind of protects the rest of the plant or the more center parts. So I come out, prune, none of that until like my last spring frost date has arrived, which for me is the 2nd of February. So yeah, my tomatoes, they're not going to look happy by that point. We're going to get a couple in the 30s, freezing cold fronts, very end of December, couple in January, maybe one more in February if it's a particularly cold winter, and that's it. And then I know, all right, I can go through, clean up everything's going to be fine. It's also super, super windy today. I don't know if you guys hear the wind when it rushes by my mic, but that's what happens. All right, so, and I have to scroll through the questions, so that can be a little annoying here. Latricia, hi, I'm in Arkansas. It started to get cold. What can I plant in my garden, or should I wait until spring to start growing vegetables? You can plant year round if you really want to. I don't know if you've seen my garden guides. I post a monthly garden guide. Lately I've been doing like 30 vegetable planting ideas, and I have ideas for everyone, whether you're a hot climate gardener like me or you're in a colder climate. There's a lot of vegetables and stuff that have that can tolerate a lot of cold temperatures. So I do mention a couple in those guides, and I kind of say like it can tolerate down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit or stuff like that. So there are things you can plant right now. The only thing is when the seeds germinate and they're like a tender little young seedling, they are a lot more sensitive to the cold. So if you can just cover your tender seedlings with some row covers, frost protection. Some people get like milk jugs and stuff, and they cut the bottom off from it and then put it, on top of your little seedling, and that's like a little mini greenhouse just to keep the seedlings warm so that they keep growing. And then once they get to like their mature plants, they tolerate a lot more cold. The first cold hardy crop that comes to my mind is something called Wu Choi. It's an Asian green. It's not very common, but it can tolerate down to, I think, -5 degrees Fahrenheit. A lot of people even say that when they plant, it kind of looks like a bok choy. When a lot of people say that it doesn't even get damaged when snow is like covering over it, type of thing. So that's a good option for you to keep keep growing. Lisa says, how do you protect your tall vining tomatoes from the cold? I don't cover any of them. I hate covering things, but that's me because I'm in zone 10A and it really doesn't get cold enough here. Maybe one winter out of 10 years where it's unusually cold and it's super freezing and then things might die. But I've only seen that like once, to be honest. So me here in 10A, I don't have to worry about covering my tomatoes. Obviously, that's not the case for everybody. Like you zone 9 people, you will have to cover your tomatoes. It definitely gets way colder where you're located. Let me see if I can find a chair, or I'm gonna have to sit on the ground. 1 second, guys. I have to drop the camera down, or maybe just tilt it. We'll see. And you know, there's so many ways that you can protect your plants. Like I used to save old bed sheets and stuff like that, and just throw them over. I mean, I have a lot of T-posts and stuff like that, so it's real easy to just throw something over it. You can buy plastic sheeting, like greenhouse type sheeting from Amazon. It's not very expensive. Obviously, you can buy, I've seen kits on Amazon too, where it's like these hoops and you just kind of jab them into the ground, and then you can cover it with your frost protection, whatever. The only thing is, when you're covering plants with frost protection, no matter the material, it's not necessarily good for the material to be touching the plant. Let me see, I'll turn it. Like if I were to cover something here, right? And the frost protection, man, that's loud. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm by a main highway too, so there's like loud cars sometimes. But let's say I want to cover my tomatoes to protect them from the frost, and I throw a blanket over it, whatever that might be. If that material is touching the leaf surface, then when that cold front comes through, that frost or whatever kind of seeps through that material and also touches the leaves. So that's not good, and it will burn the leaves. So ideally you want to set it up in such a way that the material is not in contact with your plants. And that can be hard, right? And obviously you're not going to get perfect with it either. Just try your best. All right, Erin, then I'm seeing your answer now. Then don't prune anything. I know it probably looks bad and brown and dying and stuff. Just leave it and see if anything bounces back when spring comes. I mean, if it gets cold enough where you're at and the root system gets frozen and stuff, then yeah, it's gonna die. There's absolutely nothing you can do there. All right, SB says, first time growing broccoli from a transplant in Orlando. My one head was forming, but now it looks like it's splitting into sections. Is that likely because we keep it? Yeah, so if it's starting to split, it's going into the flowering stage and you need to harvest it. It's not going to get any bigger than what it is. So just harvest it so that you can eat something and enjoy it, even if it's still small. So there's multiple reasons why broccoli or cauliflower would go to the bolting stage and what it should. It's usually different kind of stressors. One of the stressors is the fluctuations in the temperatures from cold to hot. And we definitely do get that here in Florida. It's always fluctuating. So if it does get too warm, then yeah, they're going to start bolting. They're going to think it's springtime. It's time for me to flower and produce seeds, so I'm going to start bolting. Or it could also be other stressors, like the soil is too dry, too wet. It could be wind damage sometimes too. That can stress plants out. So yeah, it's usually some kind of stressor that triggers the plant to think like, I better hurry up and complete my life cycle and make some seed. So unfortunately, once it starts going in that phase and the florets start separating and all that, like that's it. That's the most you're going to get out of it. There's nothing you can do. Just harvest it. Try next season. I don't know what varieties you're growing, but There's definitely a lot of broccoli varieties that are best for warmer climates and can tolerate a little bit more heat. For Florida, I've tried so many, and I don't think, I mean, the one that did pretty well for me is DeCicco, DECICCO. That one actually did decent for me. And that one is said to have some heat tolerance. But if you struggle a lot with the heading stuff, the broccolis, the cabbages, the cauliflower, like they always just end up bolting before you're able to harvest anything decent, then I recommend for the broccolis, you start growing the, what are they called? The sprouting types of broccolis. Like my absolute favorite is called Piracicaba, and it's a sprouting type. So it kind of looks like, you know, broccoli rabe or rapini, you know, in the stores when you see them, they have like a long stalk and they have like a little mini floret at the end. Those are so much easier to grow because you don't have to wait for that big head in the center to, you know, be ready for harvest. That takes a long time. And the longer that plant is sitting there, trying to grow and produce this head, the more opportunity for those stressors to come along and kind of mess the plant up and cause it to bolt. So when you plant those non-heading types of broccolis, like the sprouting kind and things like that, you don't have to worry about that. So it's so much easier. You just harvest your little sprouting side shoots, florets, whatever you want to call them, and you're done. You've got plenty of food. For the cauliflower, there's some Asian varieties that are called, the word evades me right now. One of the varieties was called Fioretto, and I think they call them sprouting cauliflower, but they don't form a head so like tight like the cauliflower you see in the grocery store. They're a little bit more open and they're more crispy and sweet. In my opinion, I actually prefer that than the standard regular cauliflower. Those are also easier to grow than the regular type of cauliflower. Leah is asking, what's my favorite crop that you grew this year? It's always going to be my tomatoes. I'm obsessed with tomatoes. If you guys have been following for some time, you probably noticed that. I don't know. I love growing them. There's such a wide range of varieties, different flavors, different colors. You'll never find this stuff at the grocery store. They're always coming out with new varieties that I want to try every year. I really love Italian heirloom tomatoes because I can a lot of tomato sauce and that kind of thing. And we really love pasta and all that. I even make my own pasta and stuff here at home, so I use them a lot. There's a lot of uses for them for me anyways, so I do like to grow a ton of Italian tomatoes. So actually this year I sell the seeds. I grow them, harvest them, process the seeds, sell them on my website. And this year I hit really hard on those Italian heirlooms, so hopefully by like March, April, you guys will start seeing some of those new varieties on my website, and a lot of them are rare, hard to find things. But like this one right here, actually, this one is adorable. This is Costoluto Genovese. I think that's really popular. Oh, a lot of people grow it. I've never grown it though. So I was like, I need to grow it. Everyone talks about this one. This is that Italian one that has like all the like fluted corners or edges or whatever. It's really, really, really cute. It's pretty loaded right now. Here's another cluster right there. And then I'm also growing another one that's called Costoluto Fiortenio, something like that, on the other side over there. So yeah, that's just me. That's just what I like to grow. I like to grow a lot of tomatoes. All right, so I'm trying to catch up a little bit here with the comments or the questions. AT is asking, when is the best time to direct sow seeds for cucumbers in zone B, Tampa? All right, so cucumbers. Right now is not a good time. It's too cold for them. They're not happy with that. You're in 9B, so you're like 2 weeks behind me. I'm going to be planting my cucumbers before you. I'm zone 10A. So I like to direct sow cucumbers whenever possible, just because direct sowing is way easier. right? Yeah, and they grow faster too when you direct sow the seeds versus starting them indoors in containers. And I have such a long growing season and warmth that for me to start them early indoors is really not necessary. So I wait until right after my last spring frost date, or my average spring frost date, to start direct sowing the seeds for cucumbers. And for me, that's like the second week of February. So for you, I'm going to guess 2 weeks after that. So we're landing more towards a little bit towards the end of February. So go ahead and start direct sowing seeds. If you want to get an early start and sow seeds indoors for them and that, you can do that too. I recommend you start the seeds 6 weeks before your last spring frost date. So that's going to lead you probably in the beginning of January, I'm going to guess, if you want to go that route. Make it happen gardening said, I left my key lime tree outside over the recent Arctic frost. The leaves have turned brown and green. It's now inside. Any tips? Oh, I mean, they don't like the cold like that. That was probably a lot for that's for a citrus tree. Check to make sure it's alive. Like, I don't know if you were here earlier, I was talking about when cold damage occurs, it's like on the tips and it kind of moves its way towards the center of the plant. If you're going to keep the plant indoors in warmth, then it's okay to prune it. Like, take all that stuff off, give it fertilizer. Citrus plants or trees are evergreen, so they don't go dormant during the winter like some other fruiting trees and stuff like that. Where if it's something that goes dormant, I recommend don't waste your time fertilizing it during the winter, right? It's dormant. Nothing's gonna happen here. But if it's an evergreen fruit tree like citrus, you can keep fertilizing it. So that key lime tree would really benefit by a good citrus formulation of fertilizer. I really liked Espoma brand's citrus tone. So just take care of it. Keep it warm. Give it a lot of light. I don't know how bright your inside of your house is or wherever you have it, but I try to explain to people, like, if it's a plant or a crop, like maybe tomatoes or something, that when you plant it outdoors, it requires full sun. Like, that's the planting instructions. Plant it out in full sun. If you bring that indoors or you start seeds for it indoors, it also needs full sun. And most windows are not going to provide enough sunlight, like to provide like 8 hours in a row of direct full sun. So that's where I highly recommend that you start using grow lights and that kind of thing. So if you want to help your key lime tree as much as possible, fertilize it, keep the soil nice and warm, keep the tree warm, give it as much sunlight. If it doesn't have any leaves right now, then the sunlight right now doesn't really matter, but as soon as it starts growing some new leaves, then it's going to need some more light. Yvonne is asking, do you know much about watermelon radishes? I think I planted them around October 1st and the roots aren't thickening, but the cherry bells transplants from a month ago are doing better. 9B. Okay. I'm actually growing watermelon radish right now. I planted mine about a month ago, though. You're in Jacksonville. You have cooler weather than me. They should do better, actually, for you than me. So that's kind of odd that they're taking that long. The only thing I can think of is, because you said you planted some more radishes after the fact and they are doing much better, is that something happened to that watermelon radish crop and stunted their growth. And it could be maybe it was too hot, like back then when you planted it, and it stunted their growth. And the same thing can happen with like kale, brassicas, greens. If they get stunted from the heat, they may or may not ever recover from that. One year I planted so much kale and all this stuff, and I was growing them outdoors, and it was just way too hot. So they got stunted and they stayed like this tiny forever, even after the temperatures outside cooled down. They just never recovered. Yeah, so that can happen. That's going to be my guess, that something occurred to that watermelon radish crop that you had that stunted its growth. I don't know if you're fertilizing them, and I don't know if you're also giving them full sun, but yeah, try giving them some fertilizer to see if that kind of wakes them up a little bit and makes them start growing. But if not, they definitely should have been ready by now. All right, moving along. Next question. Man, my bangs, they were all cute until this wind just totally messed them all up. But Georgina, hello, how are you doing? You're asking if it's too early to start ice box watermelons and smaller sized cantaloupe and other melons and mini pumpkins and small sized winter squash. You're in 10B. No, you're in 10B. You barely get any kind of frost. You can go ahead and direct sow the seeds for the icebox watermelons. Those are the smaller, like personal size ones. Also the smaller cantaloupes. I highly recommend, if you like honeydew, to try Kajari melons. That's my absolute favorite. And mini pumpkins, yes, yeah, you should also plant them right now, so that way you harvest before the disease and bug pressure gets like too crazy in your area. And the winter squash as well. So yeah, all those things, I think you're in the clear that you can just go ahead and direct sow seeds because you're in 10B and you barely get a frost. So go ahead and do that. June says, I find you need way too many plants to make sprouting broccoli worthwhile. I don't know if you've ever tried the piracicaba that I mentioned. I only plant 2 plants of that because it produces tons. I am constantly, at least once a week, harvesting like a big basket full of them. And that's just from like 2 plants. So not sure what variety you tried, but mine produce a lot. And those plants get huge. They get like as big as me. Like they're massive plants. And that variety also tolerates a lot of heat. So I plant that in October. I start harvesting in December, and the last time I harvest from that is like April, May, when it's finally starting to get like way too hot and the plants are starting the process of like shutting down. Lisa's asking, do I ever have to hand pollinate? What do you use to attract pollinators? I hand pollinate certain crops when it's beneficial or it helps to increase production. Like my tomatoes, for example, it depends on the crop. So tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. The flowers, each flower it can self-pollinate itself, meaning inside of that flower you have both the male and female parts. If the flower shakes, it releases pollen, and that pollen floats around, lands on the female parts, and voila, it's pollinated, and you're gonna grow a fruit. So I do like to kind of just tap my plants, move the vinyl trellis they're on, and just kind of get them moving around a little bit just to help release that pollen. Same thing with the eggplants and peppers. Like I'll like tap their stems or the main stem to kind of shake it. Right now it's been pretty windy though, so I don't really need to do that as much. But yeah, that does increase production. Some other plants, not really so much. Those are probably the main things that I will hand pollinate. Oh, squashes. I like to hand pollinate squash because I have a lot of bees and stuff, and I'll explain how I attract pollinators to my garden. But the squash, if you ever looked at a squash flower, it's very big. Like the female flower is the one with the little baby squash forming on it, and then there's the flower. It's a very big, I don't know what the female part is called, pistil, I think that's what, or I don't know, stamen or pistil. I always confuse the two, which one's the male and which one's the female. But if you look at it, it's really big. So for a bee to properly pollinate that, it has to like get it all over it. Sometimes they'll go in there and not move that pollen around enough, and the fruit doesn't form because it just didn't get pollinated all the way. So I do like to, in the morning, I always, wake up, do my morning routine, and then come check the garden. And as I walk around, I will check all my squashes, pumpkins, all those things, cucurbita, the cucurbita family of crops. And if I see a female flower, I will go and hand pollinate it just to make sure that thing gets pollinated 100% and it will produce something for me. As far as attracting bees and pollinators, One thing is I'm pretty much organic for like 95% organic. And the treatments that I use in my garden are pretty much all organic. Spinosad, BT, those are considered organic. And the hydrogen peroxide spray that I use for just about any kind of leaf disease is also organic. And whenever I spray something, I do it in the evening. Like right now, it's evening time because the bees and stuff have left for the day. So even though they're organic, that doesn't mean that it could potentially still kill the bee or whatever. So I'm just extra careful with that, and I just spray in the evening when they're not here anymore. And then it's dry by morning time when they come back. So that's a good practice. And obviously you have to plant a lot of flowers. They need nectar. That's what bees are coming around for, going flower to flower. They're looking for nectar and pollen. So it is said that bees are attracted to blue and yellow flowers the most. Do I think that's necessarily true? Not really. I don't know. They go to all the flowers and stuff I have in my garden. I think it's more important to have a variety of different flowers, different shaped flowers, different colored flowers. Man, it is windy today. I wonder if there's if I go more in there, if I'll be shielded a little bit more. 1 second, guys. I'm kind of out in the open. Let's move in here. Move into my tomatoes maybe a little bit more and be shielded. I love to sit in between my tomato rows. It's like a forest. It's like sitting in a forest of tomatoes. So anyways, so a variety of flowers. I find that the bees go crazy for African blue basil, definitely number one, way more than borage. A lot of people recommend borage, which is okay. But I definitely see that the bees go for the African blue basil the most, and agastache. They also love any kind of salvias and sunflowers. Those, and tithonias, Mexican sunflowers. So try to plant as much of that as you can. But regardless, they go after any kind of flower that I have in my garden. And I have flowers look, here's some celosia. This is a burgundy leaved celosia, if that's how you say that. And they just kind of reseed at this point around my garden. A lot of things are just reseeding around my garden, which is great. I love that. So yeah, just put them interspersed. This is right under a row of tomatoes. So I've got some flowers here. Basil, this is Italian basil. I'm trying to put one different kind of herb in each of these grow bags and just fill this up with herbs and tomatoes. So we've got basil. I also noticed that the bees really love to go for the basil flowers. But yeah, just mix it up. Plant a wide variety of different flowers to attract the pollinators, and don't spray any treatments like that. If you can be organic, the better. I mean, don't use heavy pesticides and stuff like that. And excuse me. And spray, only in the evening. And I barely spray my garden, to be honest with you guys. In a whole year, I probably only put a handful of treatments when things are absolutely getting out of control. And I think that's attributed because I've learned my climate so well, and the best time of year to plant certain things when the pests and diseases that would bother that crop are at a minimum to begin with. So that's extremely, extremely helpful. Leah's asking if I have any root knot nematode resistant seeds on my website because you're struggling. I don't. I don't, because the majority of those are hybrids, and I have maybe 1 or 2 hybrids that I actually really, really love and that I have seeds for, like Sun Gold. So, there you go. There's one. Sun Gold has a pretty high disease and pest resistance. So if it's a hybrid seed, that's not something I grew in my garden. I had to get it from a seed company or whatever that I trust, obviously, and buy seeds from, because I don't hybridize seeds. I grow and produce seed, but if it's a hybrid, I don't do that. That's a whole process right there. So that's why you don't see too many of them on my website. But there are quite a few crops, hybrids that have been developed more recently to be more resistant. I have grown a couple. I don't know if what kind of crops you're asking for, but like I find that tomatoes and squash are the most sensitive to root knot nematodes. Like the tomatoes, maybe 1 out of every 10 that I grow, I'll notice gets root knot nematodes. But the squash, every single time I plant something squash, they all get it. Every time. So they really like squash. So I think it's better to, like, crop rotation is really important. Like, I do not plant the same squash or squash again in the same spot for years, stuff like that. You're just going to have to manage that a little bit better, and research, the hybrids if you want to go that route. You might have to shut down the whole planting area and solarize it, put a nematocidal cover crop over it for a whole year if you have to, stuff like that. A lot of people think marigolds are nematocidal. I don't think so. I've tried and I still have nematodes in that spot, so I don't think that's a good one. There are certain mustards, certain varieties specifically, that are nematocidal, and Sundan grass, if I'm saying that correctly, is also nematocidal. So nematodes are tough. They're tough. I don't have them very, bad in my garden. Only like if I try to grow squash. So also when I try and grow squash, I plant it during the fall. And right now I'm actually finishing up harvesting it because the nematodes are less active in the fall too, to kind of just reduce that. Like if I'm going to grow it, at least grow it during the time of year where that nematode activity is going to be less anyways. Nematodes love heat. They love wet soils, especially wet sandy soil that doesn't have a lot of organic matter. So when you add organic matter into the soils, it's just not their favorite living type of conditions, so to speak, or type of soil to live in. Plus that soils that have a lot of organic matter also have a wide variety of beneficial in the soils, mycorrhizae and stuff like that like to eat the bad nematodes. So when you work on your soil and increase the variety of life that's in that soil, that's why that helps a lot. Check yourself is saying that you planted some store-bought potatoes and you planted them 3 weeks ago. What do you do now? You're growing them in a grow bag. There's a lot that you can do now. I mean, for the most part, you planted it. You just gotta wait. Like, you gotta wait for them to grow and sprout and all of that. The only thing is, it's gonna be a little difficult because if you buy it from the store, sometimes you don't know what variety you have, and that really does matter when you're growing potatoes. And another thing too, to know that the potato is ready for harvest, the plant, is it'll start dying back. And I don't know if that's gonna happen in your house, if the temperatures are like ideal and stuff like that. So simply just grow it for 3 months. At the 3-month mark, check a tuber, like dig in a little bit, see where you're at. If they're still too small, then give it some more time and let it keep growing. Gardening is my piece is asking if there's a way to place an order and do a local pickup. I get asked this all the time. I'm not open to the public because this is my house and out of just privacy for my husband and my son. And I also live in an HOA community, and I'm surprised, like, they haven't said anything about all this stuff I got going back out here, and I really don't want to attract attention and get in trouble. One of the things with the HOA is you're not allowed to conduct business, like have customers come to your home and, whatever. So all those reasons, I'm not open to the public, and shipping is the only option. The dream is one day I can get a property and, have a whole garden and nursery there. I just don't know how to make that happen. I figured when the opportunity comes one day, it'll present itself. But for now, that's shipping's the only option. Growing Edibles is asking, how freely do Everglades tomatoes reseed? Are they invasive? I would say Everglades tomatoes are... Where are you located, by the way? This going to depend where you're located. How far am I? Man, you guys have a lot of questions. I am so far back. Let me go a little faster. Everglades tomatoes are, I would say, medium. I wouldn't say they're invasive. That's a strong word. Passion fruit is invasive. Like some of the varieties of passion fruit are invasive. But I like the fact that my Everglades tomatoes reseed all over the place, and then they start popping up on their own, producing all that thing. But they're not crazy. Like, they're not overtaking my garden. They kind of just stay in the spot where they were growing initially, and that's it. Like, it's not something crazy. And I ask, I don't know where you're located, because if it gets cold, that kills them, and you're not going to have this reseeding, intensity, so to speak, if it gets cold and like that. Leah's asking if I mix topsoil with the compost that I talk about all the time, because a lot of people say no straight compost. So I don't mix my compost with anything. So I primarily just go to Home Depot and I buy the cheapest compost that they have there. It's a bag that's white with yellow. I think it's called Timberland brand or something. They don't sell that brand in all stores, and sometimes people find them in other stores like Lowe's and stuff like that. I've been using that for years, and I don't mix it with anything else, and I have not had a problem with my plants burning or something like that. And I trust that brand after so many years of using it. But there's other brands that if the compost is not finished, like it didn't sit there and compost long enough, that's where it's going to start burning your plants and that kind of thing. So it depends on the quality of compost or the brand that you're buying and how well composted down it is. If it's not that great, then yeah, you're going to have to mix it with some other stuff, or it's going to burn your plants. But so far with that brand, I have not had any issues, and so that's that. Lisa's also asking, what is my watering routine for direct sown seeds? So when you direct sow seeds, you got to keep that soil moist to aid in that seed germination. The water helps break down the outer seed shell so that it could, come through and germinate. So I will walk in my garden every day and gently just water that area with like the mist, not the misting, like the shower setting of my water hose. And yeah, you have to keep that soil moist or they're just not going to germinate. So yeah, I go every morning out there and just water those areas. Some things I will direct sow along a line of drip tape, but I will still go through and like just wet the whole area until those plants are bigger and that drip system can kind of kick in, if that makes sense. LaKenya is saying, what would be a good time to start indoors from seed or outside from seeds? That's a huge question because I mean it's there's so much. So that's why I do like monthly garden guides where I will kind of remind people like, hey, it's time to do this or that, or plant this or sow seeds for this. If you're 3 months away from your last spring frost date, this is what you need to be planting right now. Like, I don't know what your last frost date is, your zone 8A, I'm gonna guess March, somewhere in March. If you're 3 months away from your first spring frost date, you should be starting indoors your peppers and eggplants because they take forever. I don't know if you plant onions during the summer and that kind of thing. If you're planting like the long day or intermediate day types, you also need to start your seeds now, that kind of thing. Then tomatoes, for me, they take like 6 to 8 weeks because I use grow lights, which helps speed that up. So that's 6 to 8 weeks before your last spring frost. So your last spring frost date is so important. Not your garden zone. Everyone thinks garden zones is the most important thing. It's your frost dates, your last spring frost date and your first winter frost date, because that's going to dictate, you know, you have to count back from those dates so you know when to start seeds. Garden zones, the only thing that a garden zone tells you is how cold it could potentially get during any given winter. So I'm zone 10A. On average, the coldest it could get here is 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it's 30, right? Yeah, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And I find that to be pretty true for every winter. I don't ever really see it go below 30, but that is also an average number. And you could get an unusually extra cold winter where it will go below 30 sometimes. So, but it's a good starting point so that you select perennial plants for your garden that you know aren't going to die for you when, you know, winter arrives and that kind of thing. So that's where that garden zones is more important. I'm zone 10A, but someone 10A, I don't know if Texas has some 10As or anything like that. Well, here's a good example. So before the zones kind of changed last year, I used to be zone 9B. I lived in Texas for 3 years, which was also zone 9B, but the winters there were much longer and it was much colder on average. Like there was icicles formation over there, where here in Florida we don't get that. So but the temperature stayed at that. I think for zone 9B, it's the coldest it can get is 25 degrees Fahrenheit. It stayed around that, right? That is true for that area, but the winters there were much longer and on average stayed closer to that 25 degrees Fahrenheit than someone in 9B Florida, where it barely ever kind of stays around or hovers around that 25, 30 range, if that makes any sense. Grace is asking if you should fertilize your citrus right now. I do, because citrus are evergreen. So are avocados, mangoes. I have some lychee trees right here too. Those are all evergreen, you know, fruiting trees. If they're evergreen, they are growing at all times of the year. I mean, maybe it slows down a little bit, but it's still in active growth. So it's okay to fertilize those things. Just make sure that with the fruit trees that you use fertilizers formulated for whatever that fruit tree is. For example, the citrus, mangoes, and avocados, you got to be real careful on not giving them too much nitrogen, because that will promote a lot of leafy growth and not as much fruit, especially with the avocados and the mangoes. Are real sensitive to that kind of thing. So but yeah, keep fertilizing them. Citrus is a really nutrient hungry tree, and if you want those leaves to look nice and glossy and green, you gotta feed them. You gotta feed them all the time. KK, I'm in Florida. I'm in Orlando, Florida. It is a beautiful day. I don't have to wear a sweater today. It was cold like the last couple weeks. It was like in the 40s and stuff. It hasn't got down to 30s yet. I expect that at the end of this month, actually. But yeah, it's not cold, and I'm Florida born and raised. So, I mean, if it's like 60s, I'm cold, and I'm wearing a whole hoodie and everything. So today is actually pretty warm. If you're jealous, you all need to come move to Florida, okay? So that way you can garden year-round like me. Oh, my brother's a realtor, by the way, and he can hook you guys up. So his info is in my it's in the description for like everything that I put. But, and yes, I am growing tomatoes right now in December. Is self-pollination a clone? No, it's not a clone. Self-pollination is just how that particular plant reproduces. Some, like the tomato example, they are self-fertile. So like you just, and a lot of fruit trees are also self-fertile, which means you just need one plant to get production. A tomato, a pepper, and an eggplant, they're each and every flower has both male and female parts, and it can self-pollinate that little flower and you get production. Some other crops require another plant to cross-pollinate with. That's more common with like fruit trees. So make sure you do your research and you know what you're buying, what variety you're buying. Because I have such a small garden here, I've heavily focused on fruiting trees that are self-fertile. So I only need one to get production. There's only one exception, and that's my giant yellow Brazilian passion fruit, which I've shown before, and I have seeds for that on my website, where that one needs another plant to cross-pollinate with. The genetic material has to cross and be different, if that makes sense. If the same plant self-pollinates with itself, the genetic material is the same, if that makes sense. But some plants require different genetic material to make that happen. But I love that yellow Brazilian passion fruit. It makes huge yellow passion fruits. I love the flavor of it. To me, it's worth it. I have 3 of them kind of planted close together, and they produce so much. I do hand pollinate a lot of the flowers, but I also miss a lot of them, and the bees kind of also help with that. So it's not a big deal, but you know, it's very important that you know like what you're planting if it requires another plant to cross pollinate with. Ovary is female. Yeah. Okay, I'm still, just so you guys know, like I have to like scroll through all your comments. I'm sure I'm really behind. I talk a lot. So let me see if I can answer your questions faster and get through them. But AT is asking, can I explain the hydrogen peroxide spray? So that is pretty much the only thing I use for leaf diseases. So these are diseases caused by pathogens that could be molds, fungus, sometimes bacterias. This stuff all floats in the air, it lives in the soil, it splashes up, gets on your plants, and it starts spreading. Actually, I'm in Florida, there's no such thing as gardening and not getting diseases. Like, this is normal part of life here. I am so jealous of you gardeners up north that grow your beautiful, perfect tomatoes without any diseases, but this is normal. So if you get this, don't freak out. This is, which one is this? A bacterial spot, I believe. And I also kind of like don't even care to identify what it is. The main thing you need to know is that this is a pathogen of some sort that is living and spreading on the leaf surface. So that means you can treat for it. So that hydrogen peroxide spray, what does hydrogen peroxide do? It kills pathogens. Even, you know, when humans use it for a cut or whatever, it cleans and disinfects. So I will mix 1 cup of hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water. And I have a hose attachment sprayer, so I don't have it near me right now, but to make this easier, because I have 2 rows here of tomato plants. So it's like a hose attachment, it screws on, it's like a little canister. I just pour it with the hydrogen peroxide. I dial in the setting to, I think 8 ounces is 1 cup. And it will mix the hydrogen peroxide with the water and shoot it out of my water hose. And I just walk down these rows, spray down my plants. And they're clean and disinfected. And you'll actually see these spots. They look yellow, brown, whatever. You'll see them like dry out and turn brown and crispy. That's how you know like it's working, like it's killing that pathogen. But you know, once the leaf like this gets it, there's no like curing this leaf. It's more killing the pathogen to stop further spread. So this will eventually just dry up and fall off, whatever. But that's why I love the hydrogen peroxide spray. I've had people say like, oh, that's going to kill all the microorganisms in your soil, whatever. I mean, I'm not flooding my soil with hydrogen peroxide, okay? I'm spraying the plants, and not much of it will fall to the soil. And even if it does, it just sits on it's like little drops on the soil surface. It's not enough to like, it's not going to like kill everything in the soil. Like that's not how it works. And it dries pretty quickly. Hydrogen peroxide also very quickly breaks down into its molecules, whatever that is, oxygen, whatever. And so it doesn't linger either. Like spinosad, for example, when you spray that on your plants, that lasts on your plants for like 7 days. So hydrogen peroxide like immediately just starts breaking down. So it's very safe to use, and that's all that I use. Now, if your tomatoes, for example, get a systemic disease, an example of that being the bacterial or the virus version of wilt, if you get tomato wilt, that will not be cured by spraying with, you know, the leaves. That is something in the soil that has now infected the inside of the plant through the root system, and that plant that's it, it's dead. Like, you might as well just yank it out to prevent of that pathogen. there's no cure for that. So at least at minimum, identify, do you think this is a disease internally, a systemic disease, or a leaf disease, or a surface on the leaf type of disease? Most of the time it's a surface on the leaf type of disease. So yeah, that's the hydrogen peroxide, the only thing I use. When do I plant Kajari melons? So I'm going to plant the Kajari melons as soon as my last spring frost date has passed. And I'm going to direct sow the seeds. So you're 9B, I'm 10A. I'm like 2 weeks ahead of you. My last spring frost date is the second week of February. So middle of February, I'll be planting up my Kajari. So for you, you're probably going to have to wait another week or two. Roy is asking, what are my thoughts on tomatoes, sucker cuttings? When you're pruning tomatoes, there is a method, and the method for that is called removing the suckers. I think that's what you're asking, right? About the suckers. And that is a fantastic way to assess your tomato plant and decide what parts of it you should prune out. So a sucker is, I wonder if I could show you guys. I have one right here. Here's one sucker. I'm gonna move the camera a little closer. All right, so here's my tomato plant. This is the main stem right here. Oops. All right. Hold on, guys. Let me get the view a little. There's so much green that it's kind of hard to see it. Anyways, this is my main stem right here, right? This is a leaf. And this is where the leaf attaches on this main stem. Right here, in between the armpit of that leaf and that main stem is a new vine right here. Well, it will be a new vine. This is what people call the sucker. So that the technique of removing the suckers is look at your plants, decide what parts to prune out, because you're going to prune out these suckers. So you just snap it off, cut it off, whatever you want to do to maintain the size, prune your tomato plants. Are suckers bad? No, they're not bad. It's another vine, it's another stem. It's just the plant growing, like continue it's growing, and this will eventually produce for you. However, there's benefits to maintaining the size of your tomato plants and pruning them. Like a person like me who's growing them in a very high disease and pest pressure area, pruning is pretty important. It's pretty important because that opens up the plants for more airflow, which will decrease the amounts of diseases. I find that if I have a really bad, tomato hornworms, I barely get hornworms. Like I've only seen them like a couple times in the 8 or 9 years I've been gardening here at my house. But I usually get army worms sometimes. They hide in all that extra foliage and stuff, and it's harder to treat for them. So there's a lot of benefits to pruning. I was on someone else's YouTube channel. They did a tour of my garden a couple years ago. I think they're called Free Florida Living, if I remember correctly. And they told me they worked on tomato farms, that the farms say they get the most production out of each tomato plant when they maintain just 2 main leader vines. So they're pruning the heck out of their plants and taking out all those suckers. However, and I used to be that way too. I used to prune and be on top of it, spend countless hours pruning my tomato plants. And to be honest with you guys, I just got tired of it. I got lazy. And I'm like, I'm just gonna let these things sprawl and go crazy. I'm gonna let the suckers continue growing and flowering and producing for me. And I still get a ton of production. It's not like you're not going to get production if you don't prune. It's just maintaining the size for hygiene purposes and stuff like that. And obviously if a tomato farm is saying they get more production when they maintain 2 main leader vines, statistically from their data, that's important to know. But I still get enough production for my own household needs and to take seeds and save it for my website. So it's more than enough. And yes, they are catching diseases, whatever. I spray with the hydrogen peroxide and they're fine. Like, I don't have to spend countless hours pruning the heck out of this stuff. I also started spacing my tomatoes 2 feet apart. They used to be 1 foot apart, which means the closer they are, the more important pruning is going to be, because now you have all that foliage. And that airflow is really important. So if you give them more space, the pruning and all that becomes less important. So, you know, experiment, see what works in your garden, what works for you, what are you willing, what's the time you're willing to put into it. And my tomatoes, I mean, they look crazy. Like, this is a wall I just built. Let me see if you guys can see this. You see those T-posts up there and all that mesh and all that? I just built that a week ago, and I filmed a whole YouTube video about it. And that's actually this week's video on Friday, is how I made all this, because I did it by myself in under like 25 minutes. 2 massive 30-foot long each, 10-foot tall trellis systems. I'm using them to grow my tomatoes right now, but you could use them to grow anything. Like, they are heavy duty. They will, any kind of crop will grow on that. So, you know, my tomatoes are going crazy, and that's okay. Sorry, scrolling through. Rosalind is asking that I have a tree that looks like lavender. The only things that people ask me if they think it's lavender is blue sage, but it's not actually lavender. I've had people stop and be like, "Hey, is that lavender?" Blue sage. How do you prune it? I mean, when there's dead growth, I prune it, or when it usually will flush flowers in intervals. So after it flushes a whole bunch of flowers, it's good to prune that, because that will encourage new growth and new flowers. But it's not anything too crazy that you really have to stay on top of. Ellen Brown is asking, does rotating apply to a green stalk? Yes. So when you're planting the same crop, like let's say carrots or lettuce or tomatoes continuously in that same exact soil, that soil, the pathogens, okay, for example, lettuce gets a lot of powdery mildew, all right? If you continuously plant lettuce in the same spot, even in a green stalk, those spores of the powdery mildew fall into the soil, they live there, they bounce on other plants. So if you continuously plant lettuce there year after year after year, that soil is going to get more and more of those spores, and that population of powdery mildew is increasing, if that makes sense. That's just one example. But if you didn't plant lettuce there for a while, and you know that the spores kind of die off, some spores can live for many years, but they kind of die off and reduce in numbers, and you kind of, you know, don't let the buildup, I guess, of that pathogen in that soil. So yes, I would say it's good practice to rotate even in a green stalk. I don't know how many green stalks you have, but if you have one, at least rotate the tiers. You know, if you did lettuce on that top tier, bring it down to the middle tier and just keep going down every year and go back up. I have multiple green stalks, so I'll usually dedicate one green stalk to one crop and then rotate those out. Right now I'm actually planting up my green stalks. I have 3 more to go, where I'm dumping out the soils because they've been used in my wheelbarrow, and I'm just mixing up new fertilizer and stuff before I refill my green stalks, kind of just to refresh the soil a little bit, so that also helps. But yeah. Christine is saying that your tomatoes are splitting. Are you watering too much? And what is my watering routine? So I don't have a strict watering routine, because I like to assess the soil and figure out, okay, do my plants actually need water or not? Because one of the number one things people overdo is watering, and that will kill your plants and cause a lot of issues. So after gardening for so many years, I can kind of look at the soil and know, oh, it's dry. My plants need water. My tomatoes, I probably water these. They're growing in grow bags right now, and grow bags dry out much faster than being grown in the soil and ground, and I'm probably watering them every other day. It also depends on the time of year. If it's summertime, I barely ever water, because I have a rainy season here, so there's absolutely really no need for me to water. Right now, I think you're in Florida, is a very defined dry season, so I gotta kind of just pay a little extra attention to my plants and, you know, check the soils and stuff. If you're not sure, you can always do the finger test. Stick your finger in there. If the soil is dry to your second knuckle, then it could probably use some water. If this is a watering tip more specific when it's hot outside, but you know, when it's hot, especially in the summer here in Florida, a lot of plants just wilt because it's so hot. That doesn't mean that there's no water in the soil. It's just really hot. So a lot of people will overwater thinking that, oh, my plant is wilting and needs water. If the plant recovers by evening time, like right now it's evening time, they recovered, they look normal again, they did not need water. So, but if they do not recover by evening time, they actually do need water. So that's how you can tell. I'm scrolling through, guys. I'm sorry. I don't mean to miss people's questions. It's just there's so much, and this is tiny, and I talk a lot, so I know I'm just going to end up missing some. John Croissant is asking about growing blueberries and raspberries in containers. Berries, blueberries are probably the hardest, in my opinion, out of all the berries. Raspberries and blackberries definitely grow a lot easier. They're not as finicky with the soil, and I'll explain. So actually here in Florida, a lot of our blueberry farms grow in containers because that allows them to control the pH of the soil a lot easier than something being grown in the ground. With blueberries, they like acidic soil. If it's not acidic, it causes their root system to get locked up and they can't uptake nutrients. So what happens is those blueberry plants will just slowly die over the course of many months or whatever. It's just very slow, right? It's basically starving and it's not getting nutrition. So a lot of the blueberry farms here will grow blueberry plants in a big, huge container because they can customize the soil mixture, make sure it's something good for acidic plants. And also when they fertilize and that kind of stuff, they're using fertilizers that also help drop the soil pH every time they fertilize. If you were to dump that fertilizer in a plant that's in the ground, it's going to spread and kind of go all over the place, whereas a plant in a container, it kind of contains that fertilizer and keeps it in there and also helps keep that pH low. So number one, when growing blueberries, you have to use an acid-loving plant soil mixture. You can make your own as well, but you know, there's different recipes out there. You can make your own or go buy one. A common one that I see in the stores is like acid-loving mix for like rhododendrons or something. That's what you need. Start off with an acid-loving plant soil mix. And then every time you fertilize, use an acid lover fertilizer. Miracle Grow actually has one. It used to be called Mere Acid. I'm pretty sure they changed the name. That one is really, really good for blueberries. So every time you fertilize, it's also adding, I don't know if it's sulfur or what, to keep the pH down. And if you can do that, if you can keep that pH optimal for those blueberries, they'll do great for you. They're great. I actually do not have blueberries in my garden because it can get really hard to maintain that pH, especially me being here in Florida. We have a defined rainy season, and that rain continuously washes nutrients out of our soil, just washes it out. So, and it also reduces, well, okay, if the soil is acidic, it makes it more basic. So it's a continuous battle for me. You know, but you're in California, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to control it. Any ideas for how to use Vicks plant? I actually have a second YouTube channel called Jara's Fresh Kitchen. I just started it like a month or two ago to specifically post my recipes and like do it yourself homemade products and stuff that I make with ingredients and stuff from my garden. I thought it would be better to kind of separate it. And I have one in the works for the Vicks plant. But basically you can make a salve or balm kind of like Vicks. Vapor rub, and you kind of extract it in oil and use that oil to make your rub. And honestly, that's like the only thing I really know what to make with it. Or some people use it like you put it in hot water and you can breathe it in to kind of open up your sinuses and stuff. But yeah, other than that, treat it like a succulent because it's basically a succulent type of plant. I'm growing garlic in Southwest Florida. How often do I water? Again, I only water when the soil's dry. So it's good to let the soil dry out a tiny bit before you water again. Especially with garlic, those bulbs can easily rot out if the soil's too wet. So just let it dry out a little bit in between. I actually just finished planting my garlic today. That was like my to-do list today was that. So good luck. Some years are okay, and then other years my garlic plants just melt away. That's kind of what it seems like. So but still try growing it. It is worth it when it works out. Okay, Linda's asking, is there any way to set up grow lights outdoors without a greenhouse? The only thing that comes to mind that I suggest is get a mini greenhouse. There's like smaller ones that are like 4 foot wide and maybe like 5 or 6 feet tall. You can get them on Amazon and put it outside, you know, like your patio, whatever, up against the house or something. And if it's cold, just get a couple heat mats and put that at the bottom of your greenhouse. So that way, when you zip it shut, there's something generating some heat in there, and it should keep everything nice and toasty. I do this, and I'm in Florida because I should be starting my tomatoes right now, and it's a little too cold outside for a tomato seedling. So, you know, just put them in a greenhouse, put some heat mats in there, and you should be fine. I also attach the grow lights to the shelves of, you know, the little mini greenhouses or whatever with some zip ties, and you're good to go. I'm scrolling through, guys, just a second. Lisa Farmer, sorry guys, I don't mean to mispronounce your names if I am. How often do you fertilize fruit trees? It depends. If it's an evergreen fruit tree like the citrus, the avocados, mangoes, about once a month. Mine are established, pretty mature at this point, but yeah, about once a month, just to give them, so they have a consistent nutrient supply. If it's a fruit tree that goes dormant during the winter, like the peaches, the nectarines, the muscadine grapes, blackberries, all those things, they just start dropping their leaves, they go dormant. There is no need to be fertilizing those throughout the winter. Once I see new growth start appearing on them in the spring, I will start fertilizing those about 1 month on a monthly basis until I am about 2 or 3 months away from my first winter frost date. So that's kind of how I figure it out. Is it too cold for papaya seedlings? If you're 10A, yes. I have some mature papaya plants, and they're not going to be happy when the temperatures start dropping in the 30s. For me, I don't know if it drops. I don't think it drops in the. Well, zone 10B can get as cold as 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and the papayas won't like that. I highly recommend that you, so if you're growing papaya seedlings indoors, keep them warm and happy until after your spring frost. Then plant them outside, because then by the time the next winter comes, they should be bigger, more established plants that can handle that cold a little bit better. Linda, I must be real far behind because I'm seeing comments about the whole tomato pruning. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying. But Linda Gonzalez says that you replant your tomato suckers. Yes, you could definitely replant your tomato suckers. Take them, put them in a solo cup with some soil, give them to your friends, donate them to community gardens, that kind of thing. If you want, you don't have to waste them. Don't feel bad about cutting them. You're getting koala is getting hornworms. What do I do to prevent hornworms? The only way to take care of that, immediately, as soon as you see that damage, and the classic sign that you have tomato hornworms is you come out one day and all of a sudden you notice your tomato plants, your peppers too, they attack peppers, are defoliated. Like it's just a skeleton, it's just the stem. You're like, what the heck? It's very noticeable. And it's only that does it like that. So you might not ever see one of those worms because a lot of them are nocturnal, but you have them, trust me. If you see chewed up leaves like that, they are there. So spray with spinosad because tomato hornworms and the army worms are a little bit tougher type of worms. Spray with spinosad. I only recommend BT. I recommend BT first because it's the more gentle of the two. But that's really good for like pickle worms, which are green and they have like a white stripe on their back. Those are real easy to kill. But the harder to kill worms, like the hornworm, the corn, earworm, that kind of thing, use spinosad instead. Linda Gonzalez asking where I got my T-post, my 10-foot T-post. So I found them at Tractor Supply, but not all Tractor Supply stores carry them either. There's one, I'm in Orlando, I don't know where you're at, but the one in Apopka has them. So I will go all the way to Apopka, which is a good 45-minute drive, to go get them if I need some. And that's where I find them, you know. So your Tractor Supplies, farm supply stores like that. I never see 10-foot at like Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that. But yeah, I literally made the drive, got a whole bunch of them just so I could build these trellis systems. Oh, Roy, I'm so sorry. I'm seeing your comment now that you wanted my thoughts on propagation of tomato suckers. Yeah, propagate them. All you have to do is stick them in some soil. I like to rub the end where you cut off with some rooting hormone just to help it develop a new root system. Super easy, you know. And a lot of people, like, let's say you have a bunch of tomato plants and you're expecting killing frost or something like that. You can take cuttings, root them indoors, and then just plant them back outside, you know, when spring comes. Koala is asking how to fix hydrophobic soil, mixing in a whole bunch of compost. I'm gonna guess it's hydrophobic because it's been extremely dried out for a long period of time, or maybe you have a lot of peat moss and that kind of thing in there. Mix compost, and break it up. Mabel's asking if oh wow, I caught up. I'm at the bottom of the questions. Mabel's asking, are your fruit trees in the ground? Yes, a lot of mine are in the ground. I kind of don't have more space to be planting them in the ground, so now I'm like experimenting with planting them in really big containers, because you could definitely do that. You could definitely grow fruit trees in containers, especially the dwarf varieties. Because I love fruit trees, I want more of them, and until I move out onto some couple acres of land or something, that's just what I got to do. So yeah, for the most part, some of mine are in ground, but every single one that I have, I believe I'm looking at them right now, they're over here, are all dwarf varieties, and they're all self-fertile, so they stay pretty small. And another thing about fruit trees for the home backyard gardener, you can plant them like 6 to 8 feet apart, okay? You don't need acres of land to make 20 feet in between trees or whatever. That's not true. You can plant them very close as long as you have a good fertilizer regimen so that they get the nutrients they need regardless. And you prune the heck out of them, because as a home owner, you're not a farm, you're not a commercial farm. You don't have the equipment and the machinery to get up high and be harvesting everything that's 20 feet up there, 30 feet, whatever. So prune the heck out of your fruit trees, maintain them at a comfortable height for you to harvest. Trust me, it's going to produce enough. Like a mature mango is going to produce more than what you need for just your household. I try to maintain mine a couple feet taller than me to make it easy for me to get on a ladder and grab some, but nothing too crazy, nothing to where I would be scared because the height being so tall or something to grab the fruit that's up high. So I'm looking at my avocado tree right now. It's probably like 12 feet. That's pretty good and comfortable. So if you are keeping them short and that kind of thing, you can really cram in a bunch of fruit trees in the ground. All right. Koala is asking, since I'm caught up, what is my must-have plant variety? Must-have, do you mean like fruit tree specifically, or any kind of thing that I'm growing? I'll wait for you to answer that. Roy, am I going to get berry strawberries? No, because that's the season for that's over. I get them like in October, so that way people get them in time for planting. Now it's too late to. You should have planted them by now. So it's a very short, just a couple weeks where I will have some available. So you got to wait until next year. I take my tomato cuttings and take all but the top leaves off, place the stem in a 1-gallon water bottle until they root, then plant them. Now, John, that is perfect. You can also root them in water. That's fine. I find though that a lot of times when I try to root them in water, that a lot of them will rot before they start growing a root system. And I find that less likely to happen when I root them in soil. So that's kind of my preference. But if it's working for you, keep doing that. Koala, any kind. Fruit tree. I love everything, so it's very hard for me to just say one thing. Crop-wise, I love growing tomatoes. I don't know if you were in here earlier. Someone else asked me my favorite thing to grow. It's tomatoes because I use it so much in the kitchen. I can my own tomato sauce. I have a YouTube video showing you how I do that. We love Italian food here, even though I'm not Italian at all. And so for me, it's a very useful and fun plant. I like the variety, the different colors, the different flavors. So for me, it's fun. And I love harvesting tomatoes and that kind of thing. So, but it's also probably the most difficult vegetable crop to grow because it catches all sorts of diseases and pests. But I love them anyways. As far as fruit tree, my favorite fruit tree right now, that is hard. That is a hard question. I'm looking at them all. I don't know. That's hard. Maybe my peaches, because a homegrown peach that has been fully ripened on the tree is so soft and juicy. It is. Man, the stuff they sell at their grocery store is gross. They are hard, they're crunchy, they don't have all this juiciness. That is not how a peach should be. So for me, that peach tree is totally worth growing because it is worlds different than what you get at the grocery store. So, and they're very easy to grow. Peach trees, nectarines, super easy, very beginner friendly if you're looking for an easy like fruit tree to get started with. Oh, another one is mulberries. Very easy for a beginner. They start producing like within a year of planting it, and they produce a lot too. So yeah, I definitely, my favorite fruit though is guanabana, also called soursop, pineapple, and lychees. I just really love those tropical flavors, and I have 2 lychee trees, but they haven't produced for me. They produced 1 little lychee for me last year, so I'm hoping this year they're finally big enough to really put on a bunch, and that will probably then become my favorite at that point, but we'll see. Hold on, guys. Okay. I had to scroll a little bit here. Purple okra. All right. Dilshan, if I'm saying that correctly, is asking when am I starting okra. I will start okra about 6 to 8 weeks before my last spring frost date, which for me is the 2nd week of February. So I will be starting them like the 1st week of January. But I don't know where you're located. Just backtrack from your last spring frost date 6 to 8 weeks to start them indoors and keep them warm and happy because they are warm season crops. So use heat mats, give them good lights and that kind of thing. Linda is asking, how close can you plant fruit trees from your home's foundation? I don't recommend that you plant fruit trees in the ground next to your house. That I don't. The roots will definitely damage a foundation. Like don't do that. I do have them up against my fencing though. And they're fine. But they're not gonna like, the roots aren't gonna go underneath and like kind of damage something because it's just a fence. It's not underground. And I kind of trim them on the side of the fence so that they're not like hitting the fence, if that makes sense. And they're fine. They're absolutely fine that way. But you shouldn't plant them next to your house. Christine says, I planted snowball cauliflower beginning of October. How long until the head will form? Cauliflower is a little slower than broccoli in my opinion. The snowball one, I grow that almost every single year. That one, I also transplant mine in October, and I probably start harvesting in January or February. So you still have a little bit more time to go. They just take forever. I don't know why the seed packets say that broccoli or cauliflower are ready for harvest in like 90, 85 days, 80 days. Because they're not. Like, and I'm planting decent sized transplants into the ground, and it still takes October, November, December, January, like 3 to 4 months to harvest them. Whatever. But again, I am a home backyard gardener. I'm not a farm. And the growing conditions are probably not going to be super ideal like a farm. But it's fine. And I still get a harvest, and it still tastes great. So that's fine. Oh, koala, you're in South Florida. You'd be surprised. I don't know where you're located in South Florida, but one of my favorite nurseries down there for fruit trees is called Pine Island. They're in the Homestead area. That's where I got my lychee trees. They have such a selection, and if they sell it, it will grow in your area. They sell a lot of the low chill hour types of fruit trees, which is the issues with the peaches and stuff, and even apples, like to grow that in Florida. We don't get enough cold for those trees, or a lot of the varieties, to break winter dormancy, flower, and then produce fruit. So that's why we don't grow cherries here. The standard North American cherry requires, I don't know how many cold chill hours, which is like 700, 800, 900, something like that. Because they go into dormancy, and if it doesn't get cold enough, it doesn't know when it's springtime to trigger the whole flowering and production. So maybe you can grow, like, so you might be able to plant a cherry tree and it will grow, but it just won't ever produce for you. However, if you get a low chill hour, because in Florida, I'm in Orlando, I get like, I think it was like 150-ish, something like that, cold chill hours. You can look this up, you can Google it to see, how many cold chill hours you get in your area. So I know if I plant a cherry tree that requires 900 chill hours, there's no way that thing is going to produce where I'm located if I only get 100. So therefore I buy low chill hour types of fruit trees. My peaches, I'm growing Florida Prince. I think that one requires like 100, 150. And it produces fantastic for me every single year. And a lot of the Florida universities have breeding programs where they do try to develop lots of varieties of things that are low chill so that people all over Florida can grow them. So if Pine Island sells a particular peach variety there, it's going to most likely do well in your area. So that's why I say, if you're trying to buy fruit trees, go visit your local nurseries, not your big box stores like Walmart, Home Depot, whatever. Go to the local nurseries because they will only carry the varieties that are bred to do well in your area. Home Depot don't care. Walmart doesn't care. They just put in stock in their stores like the common stuff, whatever. It could grow all over the United States. They're not putting in that effort, like that research to offer those things. I can't grow North American like Bing cherries and stuff like that, but I can grow Barbados cherries. So most of the time you can also find substitutes for things as well. Most of the time it's lesser known things. A lot of people don't know what a Barbados cherry is. It's called acerola in Spanish. It grows all over the Caribbean. And I absolutely love my Barbados cherry tree. I sell little plants on my website too. It kind of tastes like fruit punch, like the red fruit punch to me. Some people say that they grow it and it's bitter. I don't think you're growing an actual Barbados cherry. There's some other cherries that look similar and they are sour tasting, like the Suriname cherry. And they look very similar and a lot of people confuse the two. So if you have a good Barbados cherry tree, it will be sweet for you. Roy says, my black strawberry cherry tomatoes are doing great. I am so happy that you are growing, the tomatoes from my garden literally to yours. It makes me feel so happy knowing that people are enjoying the same plants that I enjoy so much. And just to know that my stuff is growing in other gardens is just kind of just a really cool feeling. So I appreciate that. And some people will like email me pictures of their harvest, and I tell you, I literally cry sometimes looking at your beautiful harvest with the seeds and stuff from my website. I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone who takes the time out of your busy days to just write me or send me that stuff. It totally makes doing all this worth it, because I have a whole job, like not related to any of this, that pays the bills, and then I have my little seed and plant business on the side, and this YouTube channel and everything, and it's a lot of work, and I get very stressed out sometimes. But seeing your comments and just knowing that other people are being successful gardening, my information's helping people, keeps me going. Like it literally does. I don't think I could ever give it up, because I feel like it's helping so many people. How long does it take peaches to produce? I like to buy, whenever I get fruit trees, I really like the 3-gallon size ones. Don't get any bigger than that. I think you're just wasting your money at that point. 3-gallon is good so that you can get production in like 2 years, or maybe even the next year, like the next season with peaches. Avocados, mangoes, I always get 3 gallons, because that way you can guarantee production in about 2 to 3 years. I don't want to wait 10 years, 20 years for something to start producing. A lot of people will start mangoes and like avocados from seeds. I honestly, I detest that. If you want to do it, go ahead. Something will grow from those seeds, but you're going to have to wait 15, 20 years. And then when it starts producing, you don't know what you're going to get. The quality of that fruit is not going to be the same as the parent. So let's say a mango. I bought a mango at the grocery store, and it tasted so good, and I want to grow this seed. Well, if you grow that seed, it's not going to be the same genetics to that parent. So you can't, it's probably not going to taste the same. The flavor is not going to be the same, all that. So that kind of stuff bugs me. Like, I like to know what I'm getting, especially if you're going to wait 10, 20 years. My aunt does this all the time. She's in St. Cloud, Florida, about 30 minutes from me, and she has a couple acres. That's where I have my chickens, my bees. We're growing, we're building a massive like food forest and stuff over there. So a lot happening, but she does that. She'll take seeds and like throw them around her property, and if it grows up, fine. That's fine. That's great if you have that kind of space. But like literally one mango tree that she waited like 20 years to start producing, finally produced this year, and we're all eating it, and it was so full of fiber. I was like fiber strands and stuff, and I was like, this is gross. I was like, that's why I buy them, so I know what I'm getting. But if you like to do that and grow your own thing, it is fun. But you just don't know what you're gonna get. Evelina says, how old are my Barbados cherry trees? You just bought one. I don't know if you bought one from me or what, but my Barbados cherry tree is I think it's like 4 years old now. So it's a huge tree. But Barbados cherries, like the ones that I sell, they're cuttings, right? So they're like little cuttings. I take little cuttings of a lot of the plants that you guys see on my website, because for one, it makes it cheaper for you, or cheaper, at least less expensive for someone, especially if you're new to gardening and you're just trying to start your collection of fruit trees and that. It's a nice, inexpensive way to start building that. And it also keeps them smaller for shipping purposes, so that shipping doesn't cost so much and all that. But let's say you bought one for me, it's about this big. If you plant it and take care of it, ideal growing conditions, it should start producing in 2 to 3 years. They're pretty fast growing, pretty quick to start producing type of things. FN Rob is asking when to start sweet potato slips. You're in 9B. So the whole process of starting sweet potatoes from slips can take 2 to 3 months. It takes a while. Like, it also depends how you're doing it. Like if you're getting a tuber, you gotta like put it, there's so many different methods, but you gotta wait for that tuber to sprout, some vines, whatever, some growth. You cut those off. Then you put those in water or soil, whatever your preference, and then you have to wait for those to develop a root system and become like a little mini plant that you then transplant into the garden. That literally will take 2 to 3 months. So backtrack 2 to 3 months from your last spring frost date, and that's when you should start out this whole process of growing your own sweet potato slips. Shelly's asking when I'll have, I'm going to assume you mean the Seminole pumpkin seeds back in my store. I don't know. I've been out of stock of that for a long time. I had a whole huge trellis, it's still there, full of them. But then when the hurricanes came through, it damaged the vines and really set me back. I do have a couple pumpkins on there now. Finally, they kind of rebounded back and started producing after the hurricanes. But they're not ripe yet. They're like not even near, they're still green, like dark green. So if it gets cold enough this winter here that it kills the plants before I can harvest, that just means it's going to be even long, like literally maybe 6 months before I have more. But if it doesn't get that cold and I'm at least able to harvest what I have, if they're able to get to maturity, then I'll have some, I don't know, maybe in another month or something or 2 by the time I harvest, process and dry the seeds and all that stuff. So yeah, I've been really delayed on that one, and the hurricanes really messed me up. Jose is asking if I have a guanabana tree. I don't here at my house, but I do at my aunt's property over there. LJP is asking, you're doing a small tote or container garden. Are the fertilizer needs the same of those who use raised beds? I would say they're the same. And the fertilizer needs, honestly, the fertilizers and the method, the type that you should use, all that is very specific to whatever you're growing. Not so much specific to where you're growing it, like in a container, in the ground, or in a raised bed. It's very specific to the crop if you want to get it right. Like the way that I fertilize my tomatoes is very different than the way that I fertilize my lettuce, for example. So I have a lot of grow guides on my channel, and I usually always put a section in there where I talk about the fertilizer method, regimen, whatever for that crop. So I don't know what you're growing in your tote container garden, but definitely research the fertilizer needs of the crop you're growing in there and then do that. Like, don't worry, because it's in a tote versus raised bed or whatever. Focus on the needs of that crop. Sorry guys, I'm literally scrolling through. So all right, it's getting dark very quickly. I probably only have a few minutes left. That's usually what terminates my classes, is it just gets too dark, because I can literally sit here and go on and on and on and on forever. So I did want to show you guys a little bit what I have going on. So I'm going to stop taking questions for now. Like I mentioned earlier, it was hard getting up. I was sitting a long time. I just built these big trellises. So I had learned from my mistakes, guys. I didn't want to go buy more material, right? I didn't want to go buy more T-posts and stuff. I wanted to use what I had. So I had a whole bunch of these 6-foot T-posts, but when you pound them in the ground, you lose about another foot. I was like, whatever, I'll deal with it. So I first made this trellis system for all my tomatoes, and it was short. But as you can see, they're monstrous. So I had to go and get the material anyways and build it, and now, fix it and plant all my tomatoes, or like trellis them back up because they're really long vines. I already finished this side, so that's why you notice it kind of looks more clean on this side. I still got to go back through and hang all these vines up. But yeah, if you're growing a big crop, start, or get the correct supplies, build it the way that it should be so you don't have the problem. Because what happened here is these vines are big, they're loaded with fruit, they're starting to bend over. Like, look, this vine is just bending over here under the weight of that fruit, and then the vines will break, snap, and all that. It's a lot of problems. So with tomatoes, if you're growing the indeterminates, you really should have something nice and big and tall. And this isn't that expensive, okay? I think a 10-foot T-post runs you about $10. And then this mesh vinyl trellis I get from Amazon, I think a pack of 2 of them is like $16. And then I have a electrical conduit pipe up there. It's a 10-foot. I think that's another $10. But this stuff will last years, and I will reuse it. Most of the time, every July through September, I gut out all of this and I change the configuration of my garden. It's usually based upon what I'm going to be growing that year in this section. So it changes all the time, and it's very easy to take all this stuff apart, move it, install it by myself. It's very easy. So do things the right way the first time so you don't have to redo it and struggle with that. But yeah, here's my beautiful rows of tomatoes. I guess we could just walk through here. This is my beautiful passion fruit, my yellow Brazilian, which I am harvesting still to this day. I'm surprised how much cold this has taken, because passion fruit's very tropical, it's sensitive. I'm gonna assume though it's gonna start dying back at the end of December when I get those temperatures that drop into the 30s. But I'm still harvesting from it. So I don't know how many different, this is gonna get hard. I don't want it to look like a roller coaster as I'm walking, but that's kind of what it looks like for me to show you. I don't know how many varieties of tomatoes, probably 40 to 50 different varieties. Every season I grow different ones depending on what I like or some of my favorites. So yeah, there's 2 rows here. Behind me here, this is, let me get closer. This is Thai soldier long beans. I just grew an enormous amount. I was able to restock this seed on my website. This is probably the #1 bean crop thingy that I grow. Like, if you want a bean that you can eat the whole pod, Thai soldier long beans, this produces like so productive, more than my yard long beans, more than any vining or pole green bean. So productive. So yeah, I really love this one. I was out of seeds for a while. I just was able to restock, but it's on its end. I actually think I'm going to terminate this now. It's getting a lot of rust and cold damage and stuff. And that way I can grow something else in this spot. But this is also made using the whole T-post and electrical conduit thing. Next week's video on Friday is showing how I built all of this stuff. If you guys want to see every step of the way and that kind of thing. Down here I just have some space, so I literally throw seeds, broadcasted it. There's some purple bok choy there and spinach popping up, and on the very back I've got some Swiss chard. This is going to be for my Luang Prabang snow peas, and you can already see those popping up there. And we can turn around and you can see the 2 rows of the tomatoes and then the passion fruit. This was my Puerto Rican long beans. This is done. I gotta harvest the last amount of seeds from here and clean this all up. I'll probably plant another snow pea or something like that on there. Down here, I don't know how easy it'll be for you guys to see because it's getting dark. This is like an empty, kind of little weird, little thin spot. And whenever I have spots like that in the garden, I will broadcast usually some kind of herb, to be honest, or greens, like something that you can easily direct sow the seeds and it's quick to crop. So I broadcast a whole bunch of cilantro here, and you can see them. They've already started germinating and that kind of thing. So I really love to go in, walk around my garden. If I see any bare spots, man, people keep calling me. I don't know if you guys hear that. I'm sorry. Bare spots, I will just sprinkle seeds, whatever, keep it moist, every day, come through, water it, that kind of thing, and things grow. Here is a big mix of stuff. I've got beets, I've got radishes, I've got many varieties of sprouting broccolis, cauliflowers, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. It's hard to pinpoint and show you what's what because it's so closely, I plant things really close together. So we've got mustards, I've got tatsoys, I've got bok choys, like all sorts of things. I wonder if I could flip the camera and then put a close up. All right. Ooh, that worked. So here's a bunch of different radishes. I've got watermelon radish. No, actually the watermelon radish is this row right here. This is some red mustard. I think it's a Japanese kind. Chimjim asai. My dog keeps running in here and ruining the things that I've direct sowed seeds for. I've got to figure out a way to like block this off, but there's all kinds of beets in there and radishes. Over here, I think this is purple sprouting broccoli. This is clementine cauliflower. This is Yucchina Savoy, that bright green there. This one here, no, actually this is Yucchina Savoy, this one. This bright green one is a Taiwan bok choy type thing. Here we've got more cauliflowers. I think it's the Vita Verde. It's a green cauliflower. Brussels sprouts, different varieties I'm trialing out this year to see what grows best, especially in Florida in the heat. Different cabbages. I forget the variety. I think this is called Faro. This is a heading green cabbage. Very impressed with how early it is producing that little head there. So pretty interesting. This is Huntasai. I know I'm not saying that right. It's kind of like a purple version of Chinese broccoli or gailan. Really, really pretty, but not quite there yet. Here's my 2 pure Acicaba plants. Earlier someone said sprouting broccoli doesn't produce a lot. These 2 are all I need right here. Perfect. And here is some purple Savoy cabbages. And then in between them, because when I initially planted these, they were little transplants, right? I scattered seeds all over the bottom. So that's where you see, this is like bok choy in there. I'm going to be harvesting those out soon. And then these bigger plants here can continue growing and filling up that space. So it's just kind of a way to maximize space, so to speak. Plant something in there while the other thing is growing and then harvest it out. And really quick, before I ended this, I did want to show you guys, these are all fruit trees. I did want to show you what I'm working on right now to give ideas if you are like a new gardener, or maybe you're trying to build something and you just don't know how to plan it out or something. But anyways, this is the other side. So I kind of have like 2 sides. Let me set this up. This is my other side. I completely gutted everything out, so it's like a blank slate, right? And I just kind of want to show you guys what I'm planning here. So like if you're a new gardener and you just want to start out with like a bed or 2, but you don't really know, hold on guys, I'm trying to set up the tripod. But you don't really know where to start. I highly recommend, one moment. I highly recommend that you start off with just 1 or 2 beds. You don't want to go crazy with it because then you'll get overwhelmed. And, start small. And as you learn, you can expand and grow more things. So anyways, this is the whole other section or side of my garden. I have 2 beds. This one is 12 by 4, I believe. 12 by 4 or 12 by 3. And then this is 8 by 3. This is actually the very first bed I ever built here. And it's still here with pressure treated wood after like 8 years. My plan, what I always recommend for a beginner or someone new, build your raised garden bed. Okay, so this is 8 by 3. Behind that bed, you're going to put up some kind of a trellis. So you can grow crops down here and you can grow some kind of a vining crop. And I know it's getting dark, guys. I'm going to have to end this soon. So you can grow so much with just 1 bed and 1 trellis behind it. I put the trellis back here because the sun comes from this direction and it goes over my house that way. So I obviously don't want whatever I'm growing on the trellis to shade out the stuff beneath it. So by putting the trellis here, nothing gets shaded out. I am going to be filming a video about how I plant all this up specifically, but just wanted to show you guys. This is an empty blank canvas. This is, you probably can't see it very well, but I actually have muscadine grapes growing on here. They went dormant and I cut them because it's very good to just have like one main stem and then they start branching off. So they're cut right now. But while these are dormant, I can grow peas on here, sweet peas, because those will be ready in like 2-3 months. I harvest it all out. Then by then, these muscadine grapes will wake up and start growing in spring. So maximize your space. But anyways, I'm probably going to be planting sweet peas on here. Below here, the way that I figure out how to plant or configure things is all based on the height of those plants. So the taller things are going to go back here, the shorter things right here. So for this bed, I think I'm going to plant kale in the back right here. Kale gets pretty tall. In the middle, I'll plant something like carrots, which is more medium in height, so to speak. In the front, I'll plant something shorter, like lettuces, spinach, even onions. Onions are really good for planting on the edges of things because they don't take a lot of space. So like literally, I will plant onion transplants on all the edges of the sides of my beds, or a container, grow bag, like whatever. Maximize all of your space. So that's kind of how like I gauge, you know, how I'm gonna set up the planting for this. I will go pull out all my seeds and stuff, know what I want to be growing, and then kind of configure it to fit here. And then you may have noticed I have this weed blocking material down here. This space is really thin, and so I try to maximize my space, right? So I put this here because later in spring, I will put a row of grow bags right here, just the whole section. And then I'll be able to plant more things, like another row of something without having to build another bed or whatever. I also fill in this little, grow bags are great. Like you can fit them in weird little corners and spots. Like look, this little area here in between the two beds, like it would go to waste if I didn't put like a grow bag or something there, if that makes sense. Now it's getting really dark, guys. So anyways, I just wanted to show you real quick the beginnings. This is empty, nothing planted here. So you can kind of see the thought process behind it. Guys, I really got to go. I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch up on the questions. I'm going to try. What size are my bags for tomatoes? That depends on the type of tomato. If you're growing a micro dwarf, you can grow those in a 1 gallon little container. If you're growing a dwarf variety, I would say at least 5 or 10. No, sorry. 5 for a cherry tomato, 10 for a dwarf, 15 or 20 for indeterminates. That's kind of how I do it. Do I grow anything inside the house? At this time, no, but I will start seeds and stuff and put a little mini greenhouse in the back corner of my house and do that. I do have a Vigo Garden self-watering tomato planter that I was growing a tomato in the house, and that was a lot of fun. I actually have a whole YouTube video about that because they sent it to me for free to test it out, and I loved it. And I have to replant it now, but now is when I'll start sowing seeds for my tomato seedlings. So it's kind of empty right now. It has some mint growing in it. But yeah, I will be replanting it with another tomato. That was really cool to be able to grow my favorite thing indoors. The only thing is you have to give it light. Obviously it's indoors, but things need light regardless. All right, guys, that's it for today. It's almost 2 hours, 2 hours of talking. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope I got to all your questions. If I missed your question, please feel free to email me, info@jarrahsgarden.com. Make sure you stay tuned for next week's video because that'll show you how I built those really tall trellis systems. You don't have to build them that tall, but at least you'll know how to build them. You can build them shorter, you know, whatever. But a lot of people always ask me, how do I build these structures? So That's how I do it. And thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you guys next time in January's live garden class. I don't know the topic yet, so look out for my community tab, because I will ask in there like, hey guys, what do you want to see in the next garden class? What are your questions? And if there's like a majority on something, that's when I'll select that as a topic. Today everyone had different questions, so I just left it, you know, as an open Q&A, but that's how it works. So participate in the community tab. Let me know, you know, your questions, what you guys want to see, and we'll start talking, or I'll start scheduling up the classes for the live session for next month. But thanks guys, have a great night. Bye.